Reading from the book of Genesis, chapter 3. Now the serpent was craftier than any other wild animal that God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God say you shall not eat from any tree in the garden?" And the woman said to the serpent, "We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, nor shall you touch it, or you shall die." But the serpent said to the woman, "You will not die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made loincloths for themselves. They heard the sound of God walking in the garden at the time of the evening breeze, and the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of God among the trees of the garden. But God called to the man and said to him, "Where are you?" He said, "I heard the sound of you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself." He said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you not to eat?" The man said, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me fruit from the tree, and I ate." Then God said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent tricked me, and I ate." God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, cursed are you among all animals and among all wild creatures. Upon your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will strike your head, and you will strike his heel." To the woman he said, "I will greatly increase your pangs in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Yet your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." And to the man he said, "Because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten of the tree about which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread until you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken. You are dust, and to dust you shall return." The man named his wife Eve, because she was the mother of all living. And God made garments of skins for the man and for his wife, and clothed them. Then God said, "See, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. And now he might reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever." Therefore God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from which he was taken. He drove out the man, and at the east of the Garden of Eden he placed the cherubim and a sword flaming and turning to guard the way to the tree of life. And may God speak to us through these verses today. I came across a piece of writing by Barbara Brown Taylor about this story from the book of Genesis, and she made some very interesting points. And so most of my sermon today is taken from what she has to say. And she starts out by saying that every family has its favorite stories. Stories about how mom and dad first met, or Christmas stories from our childhood, stories about our aunts and uncles and grandparents, stories about our ancestors. Many of these stories that we tell are about good things, happy things, and others are about bad things. A lot of people like to search their family genealogies. They trace their ancestors back through history. And, we'd probably all love to find out that some of our ancestors were royalty or brave heroes and so on. But what if you found out that an ancestor of yours was a pirate or a traitor? What if you found out that someone in your family tree had caused a lot of pain and suffering? The very first family story from the Bible is that kind of story. It's an ancient story. But Taylor says it can still tell us a lot about ourselves, including how we can make life-changing decisions and regret them when we see the results. Now, most of us learned this story when we were very young about how Adam and Eve lost paradise because they disobeyed. When we were a little older, we were probably told that this is how original sin came into the world. And we may have been told that because we are Adam and Eve's descendants, that we are all somehow contaminated by them, infected with evil that is always waiting to influence us or control us unless we're very careful and be on our best behavior. Now, I am not going to debate today whether Adam and Eve were real people who literally became the ancestors of every human being, or whether they're metaphors for something that happens in everyone's spiritual life. But I would point this out. Nowhere in this story will you find the words fall or original sin. Those are ideas that came much, much later. And they came up in an attempt to understand this story, to discover its meaning, so that we would just not keep making the same mistakes forever. Now, the story itself, though, doesn't deal with any of that. It is really a story about God and humanity. It is a story about a choice and its consequences. It tells us things that we need to know, things about ourselves, not only about how we make mistakes, how we fail, but also how we survive and endure. Because that is part of that story too. Adam and Eve were not destroyed. They didn't die because of what happened at the end of the story. They went on. But we might ask, how? How do you go on after something like that? How do you go on after you disobey God? How are they still able to have a future after such a disastrous past? And how were they ever able to go on after losing paradise? Now, when we hear the word paradise, I don't know, what do you imagine? Taylor says we might imagine green grass, leafy trees, blue skies, bright water, warm breezes. Might imagine a place of peace and plenty. And it is a place that is filled with the presence of God. God is right there, walking in the garden. In paradise, there was no fear, no shame. There was nothing to hide and nothing to hide from. It was a place that was holy and pleasing to God. And in fact, it was the kind of place where you could walk around without any clothes on and no one even seemed to notice or care or think about it. A place with no worries. As long as you stayed away from that one tree. Now we know what happened. Eve did not stay away. She ate that fruit and she talked Adam into it too, and nothing was ever the same for them. Paradise was lost, and there was no going back. At the end of the story, we're told that an angel with a flaming sword was placed at the gate. Now, when Adam and Eve realize that they are naked, they do cover themselves, and then they run away and they hide. But God comes looking for them. Where are you? God asks. Now you might think, it's hard to believe God couldn't find them. Makes me wonder if God isn't really asking not where they are physically, but where they are spiritually. Where are they in their hearts, their minds right now? When God finds them, that's when the alibis and the excuses begin. Adam blames God for giving him Eve. Why'd you give me that woman? Then he blames Eve for giving him the fruit. She did it. Eve blames the serpent for tricking her. I listened to this serpent. That should have been a clue there. They're willing to turn on each other. They're willing to damage their integrity and even their relationship in this desperate attempt to cover up what they did. But it doesn't work. God sentences them. Pain for Eve, hard work for Adam, and eventually dust to dust for both of them. They are forced out of the garden forever. Now, Taylor suggests that we all know at least a little of what that must have been like. She says, you give in to one crazy, selfish desire, you take your eyes off the road for one moment, and the car crashes. The job is lost. The friendship is broken. The relationship ends. One moment, one mistake, and paradise is lost. And what you had, what you might have had, is gone. All because of that one thing you might wish you could take back, but never can. And how do we survive something like that? How do we go on after that? Well, like Adam and Eve, you can always find someone to blame. That way we get to be angry instead of hurt and afraid. We get to be the victim. After all, if someone else ruined your life, then it's up to someone else to fix it, right? Now, on the other hand, we can blame ourselves. And we can punish ourselves in various ways. We can start telling ourselves what a horrible person we are. We can keep track of all of our mistakes and failures, and we can start to see ourselves as something low and terrible. And that might cause us to withdraw from life, to be afraid or ashamed, to come out of hiding. What if they know this about me? Who's talking about me? What if this gets out? And we might give up. And we might even blame paradise. We might tell ourselves, well, you know, it wasn't really that great anyway. I don't really miss it. Or we can blame God. You know, God made everything, right? So it was a setup. It was a trap to begin with. You know, God should have made things different so it wouldn't have happened. I mean, why make a forbidden tree anyway? Why make that serpent? Now, the problem with the blame game and the problem with sinking into self-pity and self-torment is that it could prevent us from noticing something very important in this story. The verse that says that after all this happened, God made clothing for Adam and Eve. God did not walk away from these people. God did not destroy these people. God did not wash his hands of these people. He clothed them. And in spite of their mistake, and even though they were driven out of Eden, God did not abandon them. Adam and Eve's lives did not end with their mistake. Yes, the days of peace and plenty, the days without fear or shame, those days were gone. But Adam and Eve survived. Their lives would be a struggle, but they would go on. Eden was gone. And they would spend the rest of their lives working, putting food on the table, raising a family, just like we all do. But they also had God. God did not stay behind the locked door of Eden. God went out into the world with them and continued to be with them and their descendants. Taylor says, using the pieces of their broken past, Adam and Eve made a future for themselves and their descendants outside of Eden, a world that we continue to live in today. It is a world full of chips and dents and scars. And even where we sometimes have to glue it back together, we can still see the cracks. But, she says, in its own way, it is lovely. It is a mosaic of many colors. It is a mended work of art, a testament to the God who is willing to work with broken pieces and asks us to do the same. That is our story. It's a story that has everything in it: promise, failure, blame, guilt, forgiveness, healing, and hope. It is a summary of everything our faith teaches us. It is a story about us and our God. A God who did not create us just once, but keeps on creating us, keeps on putting our pieces back together, so that we are never completely ruined. A God who continues to live with us and to love us this side of Eden. Amen.